right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming. And to introduce everyone, we've got Amy Klinger and Laura Drake. Amy Klinger is the author of recent book, In Light of Recent Events, and Laura Drake actually just wrote The Road to Me. And the title of their talk is Blurred Boundaries When Work and Life Won't Stay in Their Lanes. All right, take it away, guys.
Amy and I were talking and we're not sure we're the best ones to be talking about this subject, but our books did both from a very different aspect deal with this subject. Right, Amy?
Yeah, for sure. It was interesting how we ended up kind of on opposite sides of the of that discussion, and through our protagonists who come from very different perspectives. Let you kick it off.
Yes,
with
Amy's came from, I wrote a driven indie perfumer who has no backup plan whatsoever. She has no help, no fallback position. So she has to make it. Her life depends on it, basically. Amy, on the other hand, wrote a middle manager that's just trying kind of cruise through life, not to be noticed, not to excel at anything. So they are two totally opposite characters.
Yes, very, very much so. You talk about driven and the opposite of driven in these work environments, and I can talk a little bit about what I found really interesting about that coaster middle management position, in terms of why I chose to do that. I think it felt like a very real place, having worked in a lot of different environments, some of them corporate, some of them not corporate. And you find people there who are every day kind of putting in their time, and it felt like a really real place, a genuine place to write from and to express, to give a voice to. Of course, in my story, someone who kind of continually flies under the radar would not make a very interesting story. And so events happen that kind of thrust Audrey, who's the main character, out of that comfortable place. So,
and my character has zero life balance in the beginning, and she learns throughout the book from her hippie grandmother what life on the other side is like, that she doesn't have to control everything, and in the end she actually gives up the part of her business that she doesn't like and takes a chance to live with the artistic part of her job. So it's really interesting. Amy, your character, you left it kind of open-ended, right? At the end, to whether we find out if your character changes in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think, not to give any spoilers, I think it's open-ended. We arrived to the end of the story, because it would not make a very interesting story if this unmotivated character is allowed to stay in that place of complacency, and things shake up her world. And at the end, she has learned that it's not a very satisfying place to be. However, we don't know where she goes from there. Have a few hints, but yeah.
I got to tell you, I am in love with your secondary character, Pooter. First of all, I want to know where you got the name. And secondly, if that was parts of him came from people in your life.
Yeah, I certainly, in setting the book in a workplace environment, I've worked in writing fiction has always been kind of more of a hobby for me. And I've worked in have a long career working in lots of places. So it provided a lot of territory for writing these characters. And Pooter, whose name is John Poudre, Poudre, and the name actually comes from, there's a river out in Colorado called the Poudre River, and everybody who lives there pronounces it Pooter. And I always thought that was really just a funny way of Americanizing it. And he's a character that is sort of an amalgamation of a lot of people that I've worked with over the years, that work environment where, I mean, I think people call it your work wife, your work spouse, work husband. And for Audrey, he kind of functions as her support system. They lean on each other throughout the day in order to kind of make it through the work week. And so they have a very chummy, yet sarcastic, yet antagonistic and friendship combined.
It's kind of a symbiotic relationship,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I just love the dialogue between those two. They are so funny together.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the same with your characters. I mean, you get two characters in a car who are so different, and they're automatically going to start having fireworks with each other.
Yeah.
In your case, they're related to each other, and there's a lot more at stake, obviously.
You know what we found amazing when we started talking is, in the very beginning of both of our books, we have the character observing everyday life through other people's windows.
Yeah.
And we got to talking about it. It's amazing to me. I personally have never read a character like that did that. My character she runs, and at night she observes. It's like a diorama as she runs by these homes and people watching TV and washing dishes and just everyday things. And she's so outside it. She has zero chance of having any of that. And you did basically the same thing in the beginning. It's just amazing.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see how parallel those scenes were, to have these two first-person narrators talk about looking on the outside into other people's domestic worlds. And for your character, it was something that she had been missing and was not ever going to be a part of. And for mine, I think it was for Audrey, who is, kind of stuck. She's 35 years old and is kind of looking that way to understand how other people live and how she's supposed to be. This is sort of a second coming of age story. And so I think she looks outside herself because she's just kind of stuck. So, but
I
it was
can
so
relate to Audrey. At one point in my life, early career, I basically was Audrey.
Yeah. I think that's the case for a lot of people. You kind of, it's a bit of a frog in the pot of boiling water. You don't really recognize how challenging those environments can be until you're out of them, in terms of workplaces, and hopefully most people eventually find their paths.
Well, and true. And at the beginning of your career, it's like your home life when you're growing up. You think that's how the world is because you don't know any better. You don't know anything else. Yeah. So I think that's part of the reason it takes a long time to get out of that and realize what's going on and how this whole thing works.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm interested. We haven't had a chance to talk about it. Why you chose to make Jacqueline a perfumer, and what was interesting about making that the territory that she has built her ambition on?
Well, I wanted, because she's on her own and has no help from anyone, she's responsible for her own life. So I wanted to make it even more precarious in that she's an indie perfumer, and how often entrepreneurial businesses fail. I mean, the vast majority of them do. And she has this gift with sense since she was a little child. And that's a memory that we get with her grandmother later, where she discovered this gift. And frankly, I just found it fascinating. You know, we all experiment with perfumes and have our favorites and everything, but actually, how are they made? It's pretty interesting. And of course, all the research you do, this much of it ends up in the book, but I really enjoyed researching it.
Yeah. Oh, I imagine. I mean, it's a creative endeavor, the research in itself.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. There's a thing called a heart note. It's the different scents, they have different notes, a top note and a base note and a heart note, which I thought was a great touchstone for the book.
Yeah.
It's funny how I don't know about you, but I don't plan any of this. But as you're writing, all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, that goes together really well. I didn't plan it, but I think somewhere in the back of your head, I don't know, somebody smarter than me.
Yeah. Well, storytelling is finding those patterns and sort of using metaphor as metaphor, I think, which is
exactly
really kind
now,
of.
if I could only harness that, but it's like kismet, it just kind of happens. And it makes me a little crazy because I can't control it, because anything you can't control could go away at any time, right?
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Just a little frightening.
Yeah. So, yeah. So your book just launched a couple weeks ago.
Yep.
And this is which number? This is
my 13th book.
Well,
I'm going through brutal edits on the 14th, but
excellent.
I'll get through it every time. There's a time in the book. And I'll be interested to hear, Amy, if you experience this. For me, it's the middle. I call it the pit of despair. I know where I'm going, but there is no way to get there. Yeah. And so it's just tough because I don't plot. Do you?
You don't plot. I can't say what I do because this is my first book that's been out, yes. and it was a very different experience than the book that I'm writing now. So the first book was written over the course in like little scrappy pieces at night between working full time and raising a family over the course of 10 years. And so I had a basic idea for the plot, but it changed so much over the course of that time and over different drafts. Whereas this one that I'm working on right now is much more, I know where it starts, I know where it ends, and I know what are the milestones in between. So,
oh, good! Wow, I wish I could do that.
I don't know if this is the way that's just the way this particular book is working out.
Well, and it's different for everyone. I think it's really interesting. I think that your brain knows how to write a book, but it's not telling you. So like you just have to figure it out as you go. And to me, it's kind of like starting a new book is like walking into a pitch black room full of furniture. And I just kind of have to find my way by cracking my shins on things. And it's not the easiest way, but I've tried outlining. And once I already know everything that happens in the book, I don't see any reason to write it. So I'm stuck with my process, as weird as it is.
That's interesting. The metaphor that you used of walking through the dark room, like I think of my process a little bit more like archaeology, that the story's there underneath the surface and I'm just kind of brushing away to see what, to figure out what comes out of it. And
Stephen King had a saying about that writers are archaeologists, that you notice something sticking out of the soil, and then you start digging to find out what it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's a little true.
Yeah. Yeah.
So speaking of, work-life balance, us as people, you are starting the way I did. I was raising 2 kids and going to school for a while, and then working full time. And I would get up, got weird habits too. I would get up at 3 a.m. to be able to write for 2 hours before I had to get ready to go to work. I was a CFO, which has nothing to do with writing, but so then I'd work 8-10 hours, come home and start dinner, and it sounds like that's about where you are now, right?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. I mean, I have a little bit more, I sort of left the office environment and now work from my home office right at this desk every day. And I've freelance clients that I work for. But yeah, and those lines get blurred. I mean, between, it's not 9 to 5 in the office. It's, if I have a client who's, on a different time zone, it's adjusting to when they need to meet. So in some ways, working the freelance life and writing, it provides both more flexibility and less flexibility, if that's possible.
And I think that a lot of people in general now that are working from home are finding that work-life balance becomes even more important, because work is always where you are, and so is home.
Yeah.
So, boy, that's tough, especially when you've got kids.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, when we were talking about what to call this section, that term of blurred boundaries, that it's so hard to maintain the boundaries now anyway. I think
mine is so much easier now. I have since retired.
Yeah. So
I write, of course. I still get up at 3 a.m. Strangely enough, but it became my routine, and the cats would get me up then anyway, because it's their routine to get fed. But so then I write. Actually, I do it by a word count. I have to have a word count done every day. So, but I don't have to worry about work anymore. A lot of times I take off and go fishing, or, do things with my husband, or, we'll take a weekend and go motorcycling or whatever. So Amy, and everybody, just hang in there, keep breathing. You will get there. Retirement does not suck, I'm telling you.
Yeah. Was it hard for you I mean, that's a big shift going from CFO to writer.
It took me probably a nanosecond. I mean, I liked my job. I did. I enjoyed what I did. Yeah. But compared to, fishing, or, where I get to pick what I'm going to do today. Yeah. Yeah. No, that didn't take long to get used to at all.
Yeah. So I'm curious to know, were there parts of Jacqueline that reflect your experience and that sort of drive in your early years?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I've ridden about 100,000 miles behind my husband on his motorcycle, and I've ridden 100,000 miles on mine. So, and all of it was done in the West. We have been on Route 66 so many times, and I'm very familiar with the area. So, yeah, so I'm not going to say the experiences were the same. I've never had a goat in my convertible, but a lot of the area and the descriptions of the area are a lot from my memories. Yes.
Yeah. Well,
how about you? were there any scenes in the book that were from your experiences?
Sure. I mean, although I've lived in Vermont now for over 20 years, I grew up in northern New Jersey, and In Light of Recent Events is set in that suburban environment that's so, it's under my skin. I mean, I can close my eyes and picture the roads and the sidewalks and all the sights and sounds that I grew up with. And so that was, of course, territory that I mined very deeply for this story.
Sure.
I don't know if I could write about it. That's
where you came from, right?
Yeah. That's where I grew up, and so it's very vivid. This next book is set in Vermont, which makes it, in some ways, easier to kind of walk around and gather things that I can use now rather than have to dig in my memory to get. So
it's really interesting. This The Road to Me is a road trip story, and my next book is a road trip story. And I didn't mean to do that, but I have so many memories that this is actually a motorcycle road trip. So I just, yeah.
But I mean, again, talking about metaphors, and road trips are ripe territory for exploring some of the bigger questions of journeys and movements. And
Yep. And traveling is, for me, a time of reflection, right? I mean, especially on a motorcycle. I mean, you obviously have to pay attention to the traffic and the road and everything, but most of it is out in the middle of nowhere, and you have time to, it gets frankly very repetitive and boring, and you have time to analyze where you are and where you've been and where you're going. And I think that is a really good metaphor for traveling in life.
Yeah, it is. Which was interesting in my story, that there's no travel. I mean, just like the characters who are kind of stuck in this environment, right? There's no, Audrey is in the same area that she grew up in, and the story very much plays in that territory. So
sure,
it kind of makes sense that both these stories have, landscapes that suit what they're about.
Exactly. I wouldn't have thought of that, but that's very true.
Yeah,
very true. Now, do you think, you're a lot younger than I am, but do you think that you've learned more work-life balance as you've gotten older?
No, I think I've made peace with it. I think that's more what it has come. I figured out what works for me and what doesn't work for me, and I don't know that it's balanced necessarily as more fluid, more I roll better with it, I think.
Well, and I think as you get more self-confident in your career and all, I think that you do get better with it. It's not as intimidating, right? I have to say that I probably have not at all gotten better with work-life balance as I've gotten older.
Yeah.
Because I started late, I was like your character in the beginning. Yeah. And by the time I figured it all out, I didn't learn very fast. Time had passed and I felt like I was behind. So then I became like a workaholic because I had to make up for all the time I lost.
Yeah.
And once you get a habit of, my husband calls it running. I'm always running. I'm always doing whatever I'm doing and then the next thing, right? And once you start running, it gets to be a habit and it's hard to break.
Yeah.
Even when I'm having fun, I'm running to do it.
Yeah, there's Liz.
Hi, sorry, I just wanted to bring up the comment that a question that Lou had in the chat. He said, both of you do such a great job of writing relationships. Your characters have very different support systems and also very different relationships to work. How do you think these two are related?
I'm sorry, these two, what, books or these?
The characters very different support systems and very different relationships. How do you think that their support systems and relationships are related?
Support systems. Support systems, yeah. Like I think
Relationships to work. Sorry.
Yeah. Relationships to work. You know, for Audrey, my character, her personal relationships and her professional relationships, again, blur those lines. She's actually having an affair with her boss, who is, the head of the department there. And she also has this very close friendship with Pooter, her administrative assistant. And so she socializes outside of work, and in some ways, those are her support systems, for better or worse. In the end, it becomes very complicated. So I think she is not an ideal model of the relationships, to personal relationships to work. It probably pulls her a little bit away from engaging on the professional side, a little bit more professionally at work also.
My character, Jacqueline, works really hard not to have relationships. She keeps men at a distance, and if they start to matter, she cuts off the relationship. She is so focused on keeping herself safe, because when she grew up, she was not. And she never really in the book thinks about the fact that she's doing this, but she is. And so she has a really good excuse for being a workaholic, because she has to, she has a safety net, and she has a limit in her bank account she does not want to go below. So that is her job, to keep herself safe. Although I don't think she has any way of gauging what that is or when she would reach safety, until she finally lets go of, without spoilers, all of her expectations of herself.
Yeah. Well, there's irony in that, for sure. That in order to feel more secure, you have to let control go a little bit.
And I think that isn't that true about life?
Yeah.
Is that you can grab on too hard and lose everything. What is it? Hold on loosely, but don't let go. The lyrics to the song. I think that's very true.
Yeah. It's true.
I also wanted to say, if anyone else has any questions, this is a great time to ask. And you can unmute if you want, or send them in the chat.
I have so enjoyed getting to know you, Amy.
Well, likewise.
And I've gotten into the very beginning of your book, but I'm in.
Yeah, likewise. I'm on the road with Jacqueline and Nellie. And I want to thank everybody who joined today. It's a rare treat for me to actually talk about my book. So I appreciate all your ears.
It's very fun. Love doing these.
Super. Well, you guys did a great job. I'm not sure if we're going to get any questions, but either way, you really blew me away with all of the interesting points you folks made.
I'm not sure we know much about the subject.
I certainly have no good advice.
Yes, yeah, someone's looking for advice.
All right, well, thank everyone for coming. I really appreciate this. And there will be a recording where this was once in about 20 minutes.
Thank you, Amy. I really love getting to know you.
Likewise, Laura. I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Sounds good to me.
All right.
Thank you, Liz.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Lou.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.